This is Kelly's. Yeah.
Forrest. Where it means. A big house, it's all the property.
It's kind of diagonal to us and on the corner. Yes. And she owns the. Yeah. And she's in Auburn too. You guys are the state. We're going to call this meeting to order. You could please have a seat. Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone to the March 11th, 2024 Auburn City Council meeting. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Present.
Amara.
Present.
Holmes.
Here.
Sarah Sammons.
Present.
And Mayor Riddell Harris.
Here. Thank you very much. Councilwoman Dowden Calvillo, will you please lead us in the pledge?
Yes, please stand and join me in the pledge.
Of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You can silence your cell phones, that'd be awesome. Thank you. All right, moving on to the mayor's commendations, proclamations, and acknowledgements. We have a proclamation for Women's History Month tonight. So we're all going to take turns saying parts of it, and we don't really have anyone we're handing it to tonight. So we're just going to say it from the dais.
All right. And I'm first. Whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background have made historic contributions to the growth and strength of our nation in countless recorded and unrecorded ways. American women have played and continue to play critical economic, cultural, and social role in every sphere of the life of the nation by constituting a significant portion of the labor workforce inside and outside of the home.
Whereas American women have played a unique role throughout the history of the nation by providing the majority of the volunteer labor force of the nation. Whereas American women were particularly important in the establishment of early charitable, philanthropic, and cultural institutions in our nation.
To you, Mike.
Oh. Whereas American women of every race, class, and ethnic background served as early leaders in the forefront of every major progressive social change movement. And whereas American women have served our country courageously in the military.
Whereas American women have been leaders, not only in securing their own rights of suffrage and equal opportunity, but also in the abolitionist movement, the emancipation movement, industrial labor movement, the civil rights movement, and other movements, especially the peace movement, which create a more fair and just society for all. And
despite these contributions, the role of American women in history has been consistently overlooked and undervalued in literature, teaching, and study of American history. Now, therefore, I, Rachel Del Harris, Mayor of the City of Auburn, on behalf of the City Council, do hereby proclaim March 2024 as Women's History Month. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank all the women that I serve with, because we're very lucky to have so many women here and also women leaders within the City of Auburn. So thank you all for all of your hard work. Okay, moving on to the adoption of the agenda.
Madam Mayor, as a point of privilege, if I may, before we move on to the adoption of the agenda,
Mhm.
I would like to request that we adjourn tonight's meeting in memory of Robert Bob Miller. He was the chair of the Endurance Capital of the World Committee for many years, and he recently lost his battle with cancer, and he will be sorely missed. He was such an active member on the committee, and I would just like to request that we adjourn tonight's meeting in his memory, please.
Okay. Are there any objections to that? Okay, and we're going to proceed
Thank
with
you.
that. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the adoption of the agenda. This is time set aside for the council and members of the public to ask for removal, postponement, or change of the listed sequence of agenda items. The agenda will be approved by consensus of the council. Does the council want to make any changes to the agenda? Anyone from the public wish to change the agenda? Okay. Unless I hear any objections, I will consider the agenda approved. Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Moving on to the consent agenda. All matters listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine in nature and will be approved by one blanket motion with a roll call vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a person requests specific items to be removed from the consent calendar for the discussion and separate action. Any items removed will be considered after the motion to approve the consent calendar. Are there any requests from the council to remove items? No? Okay, any requests from the public? Okay, is there any public comment on the items on the consent calendar? Okay, I move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Del Harris.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Moving on to the next item. We're moving on to public comment. This is a time provided so that the public may speak to the council on items that are not on the agenda. Please make sure your comments are as brief as possible, not to exceed 3 minutes. The council cannot act on the items not included on the agenda. Items may be referred to staff or placed on a future agenda. Is there any public comment? Please state your name.
Yes, my name is Antoinette Fabella, and I live at 395 Huntley Avenue in the city of Auburn. Good evening, Mayor and members of the Auburn City Council. I stand here before you and like to acknowledge that I'm also standing on the lands of the Nisenan people of Maidu. I am here to discuss my opposition to the Placer County property at 85 Lincoln Way, AKA Sites 71 and 72, that is proposed for high-density rezoning from RS to RM 30 in order to meet the state's mandate for Placer County housing element and meet their shortfall of an additional 1,219 units for low to very low income availability that must be submitted to the state by May 15th. These sites are located right at the border of the city of Auburn and is owned by Scott Arfston, AKA Auburn Sierra Views LLC, whose filing status was suspended on March 25th, 2010. At this time, I'd like to present to you a small packet, if I may. Of information that includes letters from other concerned citizens and a copy of an email that I received from the Placer County Code Enforcement on Friday, March 8th. This is in addition to what Ms. Moreno is right here. And I emailed to you on Friday, March 8th that includes pictures we took of the property and provided topos of these sites that show a live stream that flows through these two sites, the decimation of downed trees and grading without approved grading permits, even though Mr. Arfston applied for 2 grading permits in 2019 and 2023, which are still pending. The Placer County Conservation Program was overlooked in the county's EIR draft. for Mr. Arfston to abide by their application guidelines. There was no documentation that could be found by any agency involved to protect any existing heritage oak trees prior to cutting these down. No erosion controls were made, such as screens or proper installation of straw wattles or earth compactors to protect the vegetation, protected species and habitat, the nearby wetland freshwater ponds, the live stream, and the American River. Even though Mr. Wright from the code enforcement, who spoke with the owner, in his email, quote, meaning the owner, he now understands. The truth of the matter is, one, he already understood as he applied for 2 permits previously. Secondly, he's already done substantial damage to the surrounding environment as previously mentioned. I'd like to acknowledge and thank you for the letter that y'all sent to the Placer County Board of Supervisors expressing your opposition to any proposed rezoning sites within the Auburn city limits. However, this alone has proven that it's not sufficient enough and more action is needed by all of you, our Auburn City Council. We are coming here before you as a joint community to express our concerns because time is of the essence. We hope that you will make more effort in communicating to the Placer County Board of Supervisors to remove sites 71 and 72 from their rezoning list. So there may be no fallout of what could possibly happen if these zones were approved that would cause expense for our city of Auburn. Thank you. Have a good evening.
One minute. Thank you very much. I know that we received the letters on this and that the city manager and staff have been looking into this. Can you give us a little insight on where we are with this right now?
Yeah, thank you. So the city staff and our consultant are looking at the draft environmental impact report that's being prepared by the county for all this rezone stuff. Those 2 specific sites are, like she said, adjacent to the city limits, right across the street from city services. They frankly should be part of the city, should be annexed into the city. And so our letter to the county, to the board, or actually to the county on the draft EIR is going to point that out and request that those 2 parcels be removed from the county's rezone process so we could potentially annex them.
So that'll happen when we do the response to the EIR?
Right.
Okay, what's the timing on that? Do we know?
March 8th.
May?
Yeah, so we're in process to
In the
respond.
process to do that. Okay, thank you.
Also, Madam Mayor, if I might just remind our audience, while we certainly appreciate people's support of each other's comments, just to ensure that we can move along in an efficient manner, if you would just please refrain from applauding. Jazz hands works just perfectly and it allows us to have our flow come in. And that's just a practice that we've been utilizing. And so we just would recommend that if you want to support a speaker, just to do this. And thank you so much. Really do appreciate that. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. One more quick thing that we've done in the past when we had large groups that were coming on a topic. If you're here for the same purpose that was just discussed, could you just raise your hand? Okay, just wanted to get an idea of how many people are here to discuss that. Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Hi, my name is Kelly Marino. I live at 397 Forest Hill Avenue, which is within the 300 feet from the properties. Everything that she said, yes, I totally am behind. Also, what she wasn't able to mention is, of course, the impact to the extra cars that will be coming out at this point, which is very dangerous curve. As you know, it's good to hear that. I agree also, it should be annexed into the city. It really is property that is in the same character as what we have. Additionally, my concern is obviously economic to the city and the impact that that could have for us on services and improvements that will probably with that would have to be done. As well as I have been involved in the economic development of Placer County since 1987. I was involved in putting together the videos that talked about what we have here and the richness of everything that we have. And, you know, in the entire country, we have a story that everyone knows. This is the gold country. And so it's very valuable to protect that, I believe, as well as the canyon and the, you know, the animals, the wildlife, the trees and the flora. The story that we have here is really important as well. And people come here and they expect it to look a certain way. They enjoy it being that way. And that would not be a fit, I don't believe, with what we have going on here. So I urge you to do anything and everything you can in your power to preserve that for us. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair back here.
Those hands are going fast out there.
My name is Jack Sanchez. I'm the president and founder of Save Auburn Ravine Salmon and Steelhead, which we've been working on to get fish to Auburn since 2007. And I'm just here tonight to thank you very much for the money that you've donated to SARSIS. Robert Hain, the restoration coordinator for North Ravine, the largest tributary of Auburn Ravine, is hard at work and he's clearing the land. He's planting trees because where shade grows, fish love the shade. So that's all being done. And I also wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your $12 million water purification plant for the water that has to be purified before it goes into the Auburn Ravine. I don't think any tributary on the West Coast has as pure water as Auburn Ravine does because of what you've done with your $12 million purification plant. So I thank you for that. And another thing that I wanted to tell you is that the mission of SARSIS is to get salmon and steelhead to Auburn to spawn so you can become not only the endurance capital, but probably the salmon and steelhead spawning capital of Highway Interstate 80 anyway. But what I wanted to say is that in the process, Placer County Water Agency and the Family Water Alliance have been working on a flashboard dam, one of the 9 on Auburn Ravine, to keep the fish from being entrained, that is being trapped, from going back to the ocean. You know, they're anadromous fish. They are born in freshwater and then they mature for months or so and then they head down the stream and then they go to the Sacramento River and then they go to the bay and then they go out to the sea at Pacific Ocean, and it takes about 3 years for them to mature and then they come back exactly to where they were spawned in the Auburn Ravine. So my next step, which just came to me in a vision, is to put screens on the remaining 9 flashboard dams on Auburn Ravine to prevent entrainment. And that is fish going into agricultural fields and dying and not going back to the Pacific. If we can get flashboard dams all screened, not only will that increase the number of anadromous fish returning to the Pacific Ocean, but I think it will make Auburn Ravine one of the most productive streams, if not the most productive anadromous fish stream on the entire West Coast. So we're right on the verge of magical things happening. And the last thing I wanted to talk to you, the next to last thing was that high rise was just spoken. I think that was just will not do any good for Auburn. So I'm opposed to that. And the last thing I'd like to tell you is thank you for listening.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment?
I request 1 minute. For one, I was really, I was short. I didn't use my 3.
We're gonna let other people go first.
Yes.
If you can also tell your comment to somebody else and they can make your comment as well.
Hi, my name is Sue Engel and I live in Roby Point. My biggest concern is fire. And I've worked on fires for 10 years during my time at the California Conservation Corps. And I've seen neighborhoods that have been burned out. And this is one of our biggest fears is why are we putting a high density housing area in an extreme fire danger area? And I think that is one of the things that you need to push back on your resolution. But I think that needs to be addressed. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, thank you everyone for coming. My name's Deborah Fasciana. I live at the other end of the project. My property overlooks the canyon, been there for almost 40 years, my husband and I. And I really feel like we're coming into a fire season, and we're told constantly by different fire department people, it's not a case of if, but when there will be a fire there. The roads leading out are nothing to brag about. I have been evacuated a couple times, and the chaos and the fear and the anguish that goes on during one of those very excitable times is not something you want to do. It really isn't. And so I'd like to say, no, I don't want it in my neighborhood. I don't want my fire insurance going up. We were dumped a couple years ago from our insurance company, and now we all have to do Fair Plan, which is $3 or $4 grand a year more than we were paying. And I mean, the story goes on and on and on. And every time somebody asks a question, I have another 50-minute answer. So let's consider it. Let's consider the fire danger and the slew of seniors trying to get out of there if there is a fire, and the ingress egress proposed for that. So I say no, thumbs down. Let's do something else. Get something that fits to our community and the people who live in it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Wendy Shingle. We live at 389 Huntley Avenue, and our backyard looks straight at that hillside. And we've watched them tear down trees and clear the brush. And every time I'd hear one of those trees fall, I would cringe because I knew they didn't have a permit. I knew there was nothing I could do. They dusted our house and all our neighbors with, as they were moving their dirt. It was very obnoxious, very upsetting. My reason for coming is strictly selfish. I'm used to the apartments on the other side. They've got their light, their floodlights to keep everybody safe. It lights up my living room. It's fine. But my bedroom will be looking right at that high-rise apartment building with their 100 floodlights, and we will never have a minute of darkness in our bedroom again with all those lights. So my big light pollution thing is huge to me. The noise is also an issue. The apartments across the way can get rowdy. That's fine. We can hear people talking. The sound travels wonderfully. When they argue, we've got entertainment for the evening. But if you add another 200, 300, 400 people, I think the noise is just going to be unbearable. And we have such a beautiful, quiet neighborhood on the Huntley and Forest Hill Avenue area. The traffic also concerns me. It's my way of commuting out of town for my job. And right now we have a controllable amount of traffic. You add another 200, 300 cars to that on a daily basis, and it's just going to be ugly. I know that Auburn has to grow. It's just a part of life. But as I was growing up, Auburn was Colfax or Meta Vista. And I've watched it grow into Rockland, and it just feels like we're getting into the Roseville feel. And I just don't want to have that. I don't want to have to move because I want to have a nice small neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Roseanne McHenry. I live on Grace Street, 190 Grace Street, right near all the rest of these folks. And I share all the same concerns they do, so I won't repeat them. But the one thing I do want to stress here is Auburn. I came here to Auburn in December of 1980. We bought an old home and we restored it. We didn't create new housing. And I come from a neighborhood filled with vintage homes. I think what we should be thinking about when we think about Auburn is the fact that this is a small town. People came here for a reason, and that is the rural character of Auburn, the small townness of Auburn. Those are the values that we have here. And the idea of big development coming in and creating high density housing doesn't fit with that rural character of the small town, the Auburn that we've all come to love. And so on top of everything that everyone else has said, concerns about traffic, fire, congestion, noise, construction, blight, think about what is Auburn all about. And I think that gets to the real heart of the whole situation. So like all my neighbors here, I'm definitely opposed to not only the rezoning of Site 71 and 72, but this whole rezone concept of big development coming into Auburn and trying to change the character of a very valuable place in California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Ben Foss. I'm a resident at 331 Huntley, and I'd just like to agree with everybody else that has gone before me. I've been a resident of Auburn all my life. My dad actually went to elementary school here in this building, and I went to Auburn. I went to Alta Vista. Father right there, Greg Foss, local man and business owner. And yeah, I feel like it would destroy our whole, it just wouldn't be good for our town. And I feel like it would destroy the neighborhood that I live in. And that's purely the selfish reasons for me, but all the previous reasons that people have come up and talked about as well. I also wanted to say that I'm extremely concerned as an airport resident that they are considering locations right inside of the airport flight zone, specifically zones 51 and 43 that they have listed, and the fact that I was just informed that they brought in an additional how many? 19 zones that were allowed inside the airport's flight area that are extreme causes of concern. So if I appreciate you guys getting on top of it, and thank you very much.
Thank you. As my public comment, I'm going to say that we hear you. Unfortunately, it's not in our jurisdiction. Auburn, the city of Auburn made a decision a while back not to expand into our sphere of influence. And unfortunately, when you decide not to grow, it means you have no control on what happens outside of the area that you're in. And so North Auburn has grown in certain ways, and so has up in the Bowman area. And so we have to look at whether those boundaries make sense for us, or whether we need to annex other areas so that way we have control of how those areas grow, because we all love Auburn and we all love the way that Auburn is. And it's challenging for us that we don't have control over what happens in an area that everyone considers Auburn, but isn't technically in the city limits. So it's a bit challenging in that way. I would encourage all of you, because the people who do have jurisdiction is the Board of Supervisors. So I would encourage all of you to go and also discuss this with them and make sure that Cindy, who's your representative on that board, is aware and knows your thoughts on that as well. But I really appreciate all of you coming in and expressing your viewpoint and showing us that this is important to you. That's the only way that we know, is if people make us aware of things. I mean, we originally, when all the rezoning happened, saw that the majority of it was in our sphere of influence, and we pushed back and got a lot of those taken out. But if there's specific places that we need to make sure we're aware of, then we really appreciate all of you coming in and discussing those with us and letting us know that you have those concerns. Did you want to make a?
No, I just wanted to ask you if please, if you have the information, let everybody know when and what time is the next board of meeting.
You can look on the website for the Board of Supervisors.
And Antoinette said it was tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow at 9 o'clock
At
the Domes. Okay. Okay. So apparently there's a meeting tomorrow at the Domes at 9 o'clock for Board of Supervisors. Okay. Is there any other public comment?
Have my 1 minute.
Since you didn't finish your one before, go fast.
All right. And it does kind of go with what you just said. So it's talking about, we cannot hypothesize a potential domino effect. Should the sites be approved, such as costs for the city to widen Lincoln Way to accommodate the traffic from an additional potentially 555 residents, 600 plus vehicles daily exiting and entering at that point. So having to use eminent domain on the residential homes in that area to widen. And that's it.
Thank you.
And Madam Mayor, just to reiterate, I know that the city is formulating our comments on that, and we will be getting that in. We will be submitting those to the county pretty quickly because the turnaround is pretty tight.
March 18th is when the responses are due.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the city's letter will be done by March 18th and submitted.
Great.
Okay.
Thank
We
you
got a
very
week
much.
from now. Okay. You had public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. John Rogers, Fire Chief. This evening, I'd like to take the opportunity to recognize,
We can hear you. You're just loud.
I'm sorry, I'm deaf, to recognize Battalion Chief Matt Gell. So if I could have him come up to the podium, I'd appreciate it. And so we're recognizing him for his achievement in receiving the Auburn Fire Department Firefighter of the Year Award. But before I get started, I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank his wife, Alyssa, and children, Mason and Rhett, who are out in the audience, and his daughter, Ainsley, who wasn't able to make it this evening. For background, the Firefighter of the Year Award is presented to Auburn Fire Department members for distinguished service above and beyond the call of duty. Our 2023 Firefighter of the Year exemplifies this commitment. He was recognized at the Hook and Ladder Company #1's roll call dinner in February, and he's going to represent the fire department again at the Elks Lodge annual Public Safety Awards dinner on April the 8th. Matt joined our fire department as a lateral captain in 2021, and since then, he's consistently demonstrated dedication to the organization's improvement, both on duty and off duty. In a relative short time, he's assumed multiple roles and responsibilities, including chairing our equipment committee. He's a member of the accommodations committee, EMS training and continuing education coordinator. He's a Western Placer County EMS committee member, Placer County Unmanned Aircraft Systems Committee member, American Heart Association CPR instructor, an operational grant writer, among others. He's sacrificed numerous hours away from his family while tirelessly serving the citizens of Auburn. His dedication extends beyond the fire station. He's come to work in pain to avoid impacting his coworkers. He's invested personal time at home, and family time to assist fellow Auburn fire members through various challenges while serving as the former Local 4110 president. From personal observation, it's clear that Matt's sacrifices have impacted his family. His availability around the clock, coupled with his dedication to teaching, coaching, and mentoring, have not gone unnoticed. His contributions are greatly appreciated, and it's an honor to have him up here tonight and present him to you as the Firefighter of the Year. And he can take his plaque home finally.
Thank you so much and congratulations. We really appreciate all your hard work. And thank you to his family because we know how much you have to sacrifice for that as well. I have small kids. I'm with you. Oh.
I'm not quite as loud as Chief Rogers, but I'll try. Madam Mayor, City Council, Jackie Weston, your CEO of your Auburn Chamber of Commerce. I'm really glad that this we're all full, so you can all hear about the St. Patrick's Day events that are coming up. At 5:17 on Sunday, we'll be kicking off the St. Patrick's Day Parade down Lincoln Way. We're really excited. Auburn PD and Auburn Fire will lead that off. Along with Cody Stark from Good Day Sacramento will be our Grand Marshal, which is kind of cool. And then it'll be followed by a community dinner at ARD, where I invite all of you to buy very inexpensive tickets to come enjoy delicious corned beef and cabbage and salad brought to you by Max's Restaurant and Bar. where the Sugar Plum Fairies will be serving. The roller derby girls will be hosting and rolling around in the gym. Tickets are almost sold out, so go to auburnchamber.net and buy a ticket. It's only $25 a person. Really inexpensive way to support the community and have a good dinner. But I invite you all out at least to the parade. The more the merrier. We have about 30 floats so far signed up, so we're really excited. Thank you.
The parade at noon, did you say?
5:17.
Oh, 5:17.
48 years, Sandy.
You'll be waiting a while if you get there at noon.
You can show up at noon and I'll start drink. We'll start the bar at noon.
Okay, are there any other, oh, there's more public on. Okay, come on down. Oh, you don't have to run. We're fine.
Hello, good evening. My name is Jerry Gammas. I'm at 121 Haswell Court. And I just want to get a clarification on what the city manager was saying and your comments as well. So I just not real sure. Are you saying that the city council is going to respond to the EIR in opposition of the project? And or are you just saying, hey, we'd like to annex it? And if the county says, well, you can't annex it, so it's over? Or are you saying we're in total opposition because of all these reasons mentioned?
Yes.
Yes, we can't annex it right now. It's a
Oh,
problem.
and I understand that, but I
So-
just didn't
so
know if that was the answer
We
because,
would oppose it first.
Okay, good.
And then if we wanted to proceed with annexation of those lots, then it would be a process to do that. That would be a separate process as far as, am I correct in that?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, for all the reasons that folks have talked about, all of the facilities are in the city, and so, right? So
We
that
have to
that's a-
pay for all the
sure.
upgrades.
Right.
They put the housing there.
Somebody made a comment. I know this is a little bit different, but somebody made a comment about eminent domain. We don't do that for stuff like that. So at least not as long as I'm here, we're not going to do stuff like that. So just to kind of calm that concern down too.
The county shouldn't be doing things that's going to impact the cities needing to increase levels of service and things like that.
Perfect.
So,
Okay,
so
good.
we're on that page with you.
All right, thank you.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, then I'm gonna close public comment. And if you don't want, you can stay if you'd like to for the Greater Sacramento Economic Development Council, or you can go and have dinner and do other things if you'd like. I won't hold it against you. We'll give it a 3-minute break right now for everyone. Okay, are we all ready to get going? Sounds good. All right, so next on our council business is the Greater Sacramento Economic Council is doing a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Jonathan Wright, Community and Economic Development Director. On February 5th, the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, otherwise known as GSEC, went to Germany as part of as the council's strategic expansion into the global market. This trip was a pivotal step in fostering international collaborations for the Sacramento region and partnerships with international companies. Charles Adrian is here, who's the Executive Vice President of GSEC, to discuss their trip and how it translates to opportunities for the region. Charles?
Thank you, Jonathan. Mayor, honored members of the council, it's a pleasure to be here as always, above 1,000 feet. Again, I'm Charles Adrian, the Executive Vice President of the Greater Sacramento Economic Council, and I actually went to Germany with a really robust delegation that we brought. I'll give you a few highlights, and then would welcome any questions you have about impacts region-wide, and of course what it may mean for the city of Auburn as well. So let me see here. I was given instructions on how to operate this device, and it looks like I figured it out. Thank you very much. So the Germany trip, as Jonathan mentioned, was an outgrowth of our actually a major pillar of our new international strategy at the Greater Sacramento Economic Council. I believe I mentioned this actually when I came and spoke last here to your esteemed body, that about 40% of our inbound project activity right now at the Greater Sacramento Economic Council is international companies. And of that 40%, 25%, so about fully 10% of our entire pipeline comes from Germany. So our region is really elevating itself at the moment in the on the international stage, driven in large part by some of these major companies that are locating in the region, like Bosch, which is of course going to Roseville, and I'll mention them in a minute, as well as Solidigm in Rancho Cordova, Samsung locating in Folsom. These major companies from Germany and Korea and many other markets are making waves when they locate, not just here in our region, but in their home markets as well. It validates the greater Sacramento region for additional companies, smaller companies. And so we wanted to really leverage that and take advantage of that and go to Germany, strike while the iron was hot. And we're able to assemble a really robust delegation of over 20 delegates. We had three communities that joined us. So the County of Placer, City of Roseville, and City of Rockland. We had Sierra College with us. We had Pride Industries came along. We also had Sacramento State University, the UC Davis, Los Rios, and a host of other folks that joined us. It was a really busy trip. We had 24 meetings in 5 days across 5 German cities. If it sounds like a whirlwind, it was because it was. What is not on here is also the fact we counted up afterwards. We believe we all collectively had pork 17 different ways. But we also were really, really successful in some of those, the meetings that we were able to set up. You will see some of the logos of the companies and institutions we met there below. We met with BMW, with Mercedes-Benz, with Siemens, and of course, with Bosch, Lufthansa as well. Major companies, actually 4 of the top 15 companies in Germany, we were able to get executive level meetings with. In fact, Bosch gave us a half day in their semiconductor facility outside of Stuttgart, where we were greeted by their executive team to really talk about a deep partnership. We also had BMW give us a half a day in Munich. We met with Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart, and we pitched Lufthansa on the opportunity to potentially open a direct flight here to the greater Sacramento region. Finally, we also had a really successful event in Stuttgart to promote our region as a place to do business to companies and people who work with companies in the German market. We had over 50 people show up, which is very unusual for a first-time event in the market, but it shows a little bit about the catalytic opportunities that we have generated already. So to give you an example of this, we've actually had 4 new projects already. In fact, this morning, my team met with a supplier to Bosch that is actively searching for real estate in the region. They know they need to be close to the facility in Roseville. And we've had 4 additional companies already that have told us the same thing. That gives you a good indication. I believe the last time I spoke, I talked about the sort of the multiplier effect of having these major facilities come in, where it's not just about the jobs themselves and the investment itself, but it's about the whole ecosystem that surrounds these companies that they now need to be on site. The Bosch facility is over $1.5 billion investment, and it has to run 24/7, 365. Downtime of a single line at Bosch is the cost of that is in the millions of dollars a day. And so if you are a supplier to them, if you are an equipment vendor, you have to be available within minutes sometimes to go and repair an issue on the line. And of course, that generates jobs in our region and additional locations for companies. In addition to this, we're actually in active talks. Sacramento State and UC Davis are in active talks with the Aachen University in Aachen, Germany, formalizing a potential partnership with them around zero emission vehicle or zero emission engineering overall, not just vehicles, but also other things like battery storage. Of course, Bosch is we're going to be forming a much deeper and regional partnership with them around supply chain, but also workforce development with Sierra College, for example. They will be designing training programs for them for a company called SMA Solar that has its North American headquarters in Rockland, right down the hill from here. Los Rios is going to be working closely with Siemens around things like virtual reality welding technology. We got a demonstration of that at their facility in Krefeld. And then finally, we have an opportunity to recruit a Lufthansa flight into the market here. We have some potential commitments there that we need to act on over the next year or so to actually get a direct flight into Germany. So a little bit about why we were successful. I think this is important also for you all as elected officials, because we had elected officials join us, and we understand that that is a commitment both for the community and for the folks in person, the personal commitments for folks taking folks away from their families. But that was really, really important. In international markets, in particular, there's a great deal of respect for government officials, and you can really elevate the access you get to companies by showing up with a delegation where you have some titles in tow, if you will. We also built upon some of our existing relationships and some of the existing activity that we've had in the market over time, and that's something that we feel really good about. This is not our first, it may be our first big foray, official foray into Germany, but we've been there many times before. We were ambitious. 24 meetings in 5 days is not a small amount. And then finally, I want to stress that you all, as leaders in this region, have built a great product. It's not a hard sell when you actually explain the value proposition for the region to a German company. Germans really, they love hiking, they love skiing, they love access to trails, they love all the things that we're great at, particularly here in the foothill communities. And so that was, you know, we had some fantastic conversations around that. So with that, I will yield my time here and see if there are any questions.
I just wanted to ask real fast, Jonathan and Sean, how do you see this relating to Auburn, or how are we able to, we've been in GSEC for a little bit now, not very long, but what is our interaction like? When we're talking about big companies coming to Roseville and other places nearby, what does that mean for Auburn? We don't have the space to necessarily get those big companies. So how does that relate to us?
So a lot of the work we've been doing with the form-based code and trying to bring in the live work kind of environment, that would be really pivotal because we provide that quality of life for people who probably work in those facilities, executives and so forth, who value outdoor living and recreation and so forth. Also, we're working on our general plan update right now. And that's one of the things we need to look at as an economic strategy and how we do expand. So we do have areas available for companies, but probably 500 acres and so forth. Some of these bigger companies are looking for, that won't be us, but some of the smaller niche industries or even startups that pivot off of those other bigger players could be a great opportunity for us. You know, the rising tide floats all boats. So as long as, you know, the economy locally is doing very well, it continues to create investment.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring it down to our level because I just don't see us.
It is
going
hard
in
to
a
look
big
at right
company.
now and go, what are we going to
Yeah.
do? But
Okay.
that's part of a bigger picture and a longer term plan.
Okay.
Has it materialized into anything at the airport at all?
We don't have any room at the airport.
Yeah, we're full at the airport right now. But I know that some of the companies that are at our airport would benefit from these businesses here because they're service related companies.
So they could get business.
I was going to say something, you know, the similar thing about rising tides, or rising tides lift all boats, whatever. But also, you know, you got to think about folks who are, even if they're not necessarily living in Auburn, they are looking for outdoor recreation.
Yeah.
So they
Yeah.
come up here for that kind of stuff as well. So it's not a tangible, like we know that we're getting this business that's going to bring X dollars amount of sales tax revenue, but there is ancillary positive effects for sure.
Absolutely.
That spread throughout the whole region, frankly.
Okay. Yeah, I know that. I just wanted to make sure that when we're talking about GSEC, when they're talking about big companies coming to places that aren't Auburn, that we just kind of talk about what that means for us.
And if I may add, I could also say the smaller or the projects, if you will, as we call them in economic development speak, that we have generated from the visit to Germany are not all large. Some of them are fairly small. They may be, you know, 5 to 10 or 2 to 5 people. Germany is a phenomenal market for a community like Auburn because we actually joked around that maybe we should adopt their National Day of Hiking. They actually have a day in Germany where all school children are given off a day to go hiking. And that gives you an example that tells you a little bit about the German mentality. And so I can entirely envision, given the fact you're within, you know, 25 minutes of the plant in Roseville, with traffic. If we were, once we get traction on some of these companies, they're now in the early stages of looking for real estate. So we will be working with Jonathan, for example, on identifying, okay, well, maybe you're just looking for a tiny warehouse space, or you're just looking for a small office. You don't need necessarily 20,000 square feet or 50,000 or 100,000 square feet, but this is a much smaller footprint. I could absolutely see that happening. And then over time, these companies tend to grow. Foreign companies moving into the U.S. market invariably grow faster than domestic companies because they have a growth strategy and they come with capital from home. So yes, there are all these sort of spillover effects and ancillary benefits that come from the facility in Roseville, but I would not rule out the opportunity of recruiting companies directly here to the city as well.
Great, thank you.
It's very exciting. When I first heard about Bosch coming in, it's just a huge benefit for the entire region. And so we're incredibly excited. And so thank you for all the great work that you're doing. Very important work. And we look forward to continuing that line of success. So absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for your support of our work. Oh, thank you.
Councilman Holmes, did you have a question?
Yes, I'm assuming nobody from Auburn was on this delegation.
No.
Correct. There was an invitation issued, but yes, no one from the city of Auburn, but of course, community or the Placer County was there represented.
There was an invitation.
Yeah, we'd issued a broad invitation to anyone who was an investor in GSEC, correct.
I see. And did Barry lead this?
Barry was there, absolutely, along with myself and an additional staff member at GSEC, and then 20 delegates, yes.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We had a presentation on this trip at the Economic Development Committee for Placer County, and Bonnie talked. She went. The head of Sierra College went. They said it was very productive and they had lots of great meetings. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you so much. We really appreciate you coming to share this with us. I think this will end up being really beneficial for everyone in the long run. So thank you so much.
Yes, danke schön.
Okay, moving on to our next item, resolution relating to protection of local control of land use issues.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I'll introduce this and I'll turn it over to Councilmember Dowden Calvillo and Sierra Salmons. So this resolution was submitted by Councilmembers Dowden Calvillo and Sierra Salmons, pertains to local control of zoning and land use issues. It's stems out of I can't remember the name of the organization, but it stems out of an organization that's looking to California Cities for Local Control. So it's a grassroots organization looking to kind of stem the way that California tends to look at a one-size-fits-all approach for cities, as opposed to allowing the individual cities and counties basically do their own planning. So with that, I'll turn it over to Councilmember.
Thank you very much. So really, this is just, as you know, and Michelle and I spoke about this, I have always been a huge advocate for local control. That's why we're elected. We're elected because we know our constituency, we know our needs, we know our properties better than the state of California does. And this is a battle that we constantly have at the League of Cities whenever the state comes in and tries to tell us that folks can do things by right versus coming through the city. And so this is just to further support the effort of local control. There are 81 cities have already passed resolutions, including Colfax, Folsom, and Roseville, and more than 670 elected officials have signed on. And some of those are from cities, Galt, Elk Grove, and many others. Their cities may not have adopted a resolution, but there are a lot of individual council members and county board of supervisors that have, well, actually, this is just cities, so that have signed on this. And it's just really in support of maintaining that local control, because we know what's best for our jurisdiction. And, with regards to housing, certainly we recognize that we need to meet our housing numbers that are required. And we do the best that we can, and we're not opposed to housing. So that's not an issue for us. There are jurisdictions where they just oppose every single proposed housing development. And so I think sometimes the state then just takes a broad swath and says the entire state of California, there will be these new requirements, regardless of whether or not your jurisdiction is working hard to ensure that you have the proper zoning and so forth for housing, like Auburn. So in any event, it's just really to support, again, our efforts to ensure local control here.
Okay. Are there questions? Do you have a question? Councilman Mara?
I don't know who I direct this to, but is this in response to any particular legislation? Is it SB 330 or?
There's been a lot of legislation that's been enacted over the past couple of years. I can't cite all the different bill numbers, but there have been multiple. There was one just recently that would allow for the siting of homeless shelters on commercial properties and in parking lots with a right without having to come to the city councils. That isn't going to affect us specifically because we are in a high fire severity zone. And so there was a little clip from, exemption for that, but many different pieces of legislation where they're basically allowing individual or developers or what have you to come in and just build where they want to without having to come to the city council. But I can't give you a list. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
Okay, so there's nothing in particular. I mean, I read the resolution and yeah, it didn't have anything.
Yeah, over the past couple of years, I mean, probably this has been happening 5 or 6 years at least, so.
Well, that's the only question I had. I have some concerns.
Yeah.
Sure.
Are there any other questions?
No, I'm in favor of moving this forward, so.
I have a couple quick questions. So you said other jurisdictions have done this. What has that resulted in? Like, other than them just making a broad statement that they want local control, which I don't think there's any state government official that doesn't assume that we want local control. So stating the obvious in a resolution doesn't seem like it moves anything forward. I'm just trying to figure out by us doing this, what this actually would move forward.
Really, it's showing there's an effort, to the legislature, to the governor, that there are jurisdictions that really do want to retain that local control. And so they're just trying to get a coalition together to really demonstrate that. It's voices and numbers, right? So it's just trying to really demonstrate. The League of Cities hasn't always taken a position of local control. And so I think this is kind of counter to that a little bit.
Okay.
Right?
Is this the resolution that all the cities are using?
Yes,
The exact
it's the
same
same
one?
one. It's the same resolution. Yeah, we didn't revise it.
I'm a little bit concerned about putting it in a resolution because it seems like a policy statement and it seems like this would be part of a platform that the city would have and would lobby on behalf of, which I think we are in need of, because when we go and do things like for League of Cities, or if we're going to cap, we don't really have any stated positions on things that we can go and move forward other than broad things that we've kind of talked about. So I think that should be we should work on that and maybe include that in the strategic plan. I feel like I don't think it's necessarily worth our time to put every idea that we have that we don't like that the state does into a resolution. That seems a bit like a waste of our time, considering it's not anything that the state is going to really do anything about. And it's not anything that everyone doesn't already know that we support local control.
But actually, Madam Mayor, there are a lot of jurisdictions that are happy with the state coming in and telling what to do. And I will tell you that it's amazing. But when I sit on the League of Cities, I see that.
Could we possibly include this with a list of all of the policy statements and things that we agree with and pass it all together as one big list of priorities instead of having to do them all individually?
I think that, taking a look at all of our policies, that would be a pretty comprehensive thing. This was just.
No, I just mean legislative priorities and things that we would, because I mean, this is really talking about legislation. It's not really talking about anything else.
It's talking about legislation or regulations, because the state also, promulgates regulations which don't go through the legislative process.
And cities and organizations have a legislative and regulatory process where they approve of a platform for the year.
They do. We don't really do that. This really, again, the intent here was just to vocalize our support to retain local control over land use decisions. And that's really what the intent of this is. As I think maybe what you're thinking about is something on a much broader,
I just don't want
stage.
each things like this to keep coming up and us to
Mhm.
vote in on them individually. It's to state things that it's
We
not.
have from time to time taken positions on things. And again, this is just sort of a generic statement of local control. It's
Yeah,
not like we're saying,
Yeah.
we're, because there are many things we are in support of and, I mean, but it's just kind of a blanket overall statement that we support local control. And that's really what it's intended to just, when it comes to anything.
Yeah, I just don't want to, and we support public safety and we support fire protection and there's a lot of things that we would generally support that may not necessarily every other city supports. And so I just am trying to make sure we do it in an organized way. So we don't end up having to create support. It's not even a support letter or an opposed letter to particular legislation. It's just a general everything. So I'm just a little concerned about having a really general, we support the idea of something that we have to, it just seems a little odd versus us having a piece of legislation that we oppose and we write a letter opposing it and support something.
And I like to weigh in on that too. My concern too is I had the same question, how does that help us? Number one, I mean, everybody wants local control, but then sometimes there has to be uniformity too. And so, I mean, a particular legislation, I would certainly be supportive of. But this is very generic and it's also couched in the negative. And I'm not sure if that would hurt us in the future. I understand there's some cities who are designated as pro-development and they have more access to grants. So I don't know if this would preclude us. I'm just kind of concerned about having something like this that's not necessary, gives us nothing
Well, may I add, I mean, since
Go ahead.
Yes.
Please do.
just in my experience in a different organization, going through so many pieces of legislature that affect small to rural school districts, many unfunded mandates, and we just never spoke up. We have CSBA, which is basically like the League of California Cities, and we never really spoke up in terms of, hey, we need to have local control. Yes, we have LCAP, we have a local control accountability plan, but we were never really able to say, look, this piece of legislation that you're giving us doesn't suit us. And so when Councilwoman Dowden Camilo brought this to my attention, I'm on board with it, because if we just pick and choose every single piece of legislation instead of just making a statement, and this is all that it is, it's a statement. And not everybody does think that we want local control. I have seen many school districts and other agencies that I work with in my county role that are perfectly fine with just having been told what to do. And yet their citizens, their constituents are growing increasingly frustrating, wondering why their government officials aren't speaking for them. And so that's why I'm in support of it the way it stands. Absolutely. Should we take a look? Should we do a resolution for every single issue? Not at all.
I think and I agree, we should have
Yeah.
policy statements. We don't have any right now, but I just hate to pick and choose. I think we should actually have a list of policy statements so that we know where we stand on everything and we have agreement. Because we don't really have, like, when I'm going to cap, we don't really have anything that we've agreed on that I should be pushing for necessarily. I think it's important to have policy statements of all different kinds and not necessarily just picking this one. So I just don't know if this is the right context for this. I'd like to kind of look at it more holistically.
Yeah, because I think this, part of it says, section 1 says, the city of Auburn is opposed to the current practice of legislation of the state of California of continually proposing and passing multitudes of bills that directly impact and interfere with the ability of the cities to have basically local control. But, we do need housing. So I think there's some instances, since it's so broad, I'm just having some difficulty.
No, I know, and I totally understand that. And again, I'm not opposed to housing either, but shouldn't we be the ones to decide what works best for our city?
And this doesn't preclude our support of housing.
Exactly.
What this is just saying is that we want to retain that authority to make those decisions. This is not an anti-housing so this
No.
is really, this is a support local control. That's really what it is on any land use decision. So again, when I brought up the issue about citing homeless shelters, in commercial properties, that is an attempt to take local control from a jurisdiction. So it's and again, to me, that's one of the fundamental aspects of local government is retaining control over your jurisdiction. And on anything, I obviously there are regulations and there are laws and there are rules that we have to adhere to, and we do. I'm not suggesting that we go rogue or do anything of that nature. This is simply just a statement that local control is important, and we should fight hard to ensure that we retain that local control.
Then should we make it more broad and not talk about land use specifically and just say local control from the state is important and have?
Well,
it be
it's
truly
land
broad?
use. It's land use simply because so much of that control is happening with regard to land use. So it's any, I mean, if it's a local control, mostly we get told what to do when it comes to land use. I mean, we get told, that's really right. Most of the requirements are, I mean, there are plenty of
And
others.
Garbage and lots of other things.
There's lots of
Power and all kinds of fun things.
So, but I mean, what we're seeing more of a grab though is on land use decisions. That's really where they're coming in and dictating to us and giving people inalienable rights to do something without even, they have to get a permit, but they don't have to come up. It's not something that the city council can even discuss or debate.
Yeah.
It's just thou has the inalienable right to cite something somewhere. And, that means our constituents aren't able to weigh in either.
No,
And so it's a really, like I said, that's why. So with land use, I mean, those decisions should be here. Our constituents, our business owners should have the opportunity to weigh in on those kinds of decisions, because those are decisions that should be made at the local level versus Sacramento, where it's a one size fits all, because one size does not fit all. The state of California is incredibly diverse. And so, so I felt it was important. And this is something, like I said, that I'm constantly dealing with in the League of Cities on the board of directors and trying to ensure that we have that local control. We're talking about, as you know, there's a ballot measure coming up in November if the California Supreme Court doesn't intercede in that, but there's issues in the court on that, that would change the way that we assess fees and raise taxes and do things like that. And that's a very conservative measure that's behind that. And I am opposed to that measure in part because we should retain local control in determining how we finance, right? And so it's just consistent with regards to that. So
I guess that's where I'm at is I don't see why this should be any more important than us making a statement on finance as far as local control. I don't see why this should be any more important than us having our own local control around garbage and all the organics issues that we're having. So I don't know, are we going to start creating letters saying that we want local control for all those
Madam
things? 'Cause
Mayor,
I don't think it's any more important. What?
I agree with Alice.
Okay.
And I think by passing this, it makes a statement that when I or you go and talk to our state legislators, assemblyman and state senator, that we can add that other stuff on there, but by having this statement, that gives us at least a foot in the door to make our concerns evident to them.
So should we direct staff to make these for the other items that we think are critical for the city as
I
well?
would say not, no, but we go with this now, and then
Well, I hear what you're saying, but California right now is in a major housing crisis. And so we're zeroing in on land use. So, I'd like to see what exactly we want to oppose out there rather than have something generic like this.
By signing on to this, does this mean that this coalition can use our name and oppose things that we?
no, it's
really
just,
have-
we're on a website. It's just listed. We're listed there on a website that shows that we've adopted the resolution.
And does that
as a
website have
voice.
specific legislation that it opposes?
I don't know if they take position. We would have to vote on whether or not we would support or oppose legislation. So they would not be using our name in support or opposition to specific legislation. Again, this is really kind of in response to some recent action that was happening at the league level. So they can't say all these jurisdictions support AB 23 or all these organizations oppose SB 12, because we have not weighed in on those specific legislation. It's really just establishing a listing of cities that have signed on to say, look, local control of land use is important to us.
So this
And-
is really a response to the League of Cities not having agreement. It's not necessarily anything that I mean, this is just the folks who don't agree with what the League of Cities is doing.
The initial, I believe that this started from some jurisdictions that had concerns that they wanted the league to take a stronger position on local control. And so I think then they started their own efforts. I am very supportive of the league. I am on the board of directors. So I'm not trying to do something that would hurt the league by any means. And that's not what this would, it's just showing that there are jurisdictions who take local land use and control to heart, and it's important for them, despite the fact that the league has not taken, in some instances, the league has been strong, and in others they have not. But it is really just saying, look, these are cities where it's important. This does not preclude any kind of development. It's simply saying we don't want the state to tell us where to put things or how to put things. If it's housing or if it's, any kind of a land use.
I agree. It's very benign. It doesn't do anything. I'm not opposed to it because it doesn't do anything, but I'm just also, it doesn't do anything. So I don't like to make work just to make work for folks. And I don't
think
like to
there's any work.
prioritize
Yeah,
just land use
Wait,
as a thing that we think is more important to have local control over the other things that are also financially hurting us right now, like organics and other types of things.
But the work has already been done, and we just would adopt a resolution and
Yeah,
a letter. The
well-
work's already done.
My feeling is that by making this statement, that in future, our legislators may come before something is passed, they may come and ask for our opinion as to other mandates that the state wants to put on us. So I'm in favor of approving this resolution, and then we'll, I know I'm going to talk to Patterson, and I'm going to talk to Nilo and others and let them know that we've made this statement, and it would be useful to have, if other legislation comes up that is similar to this, that we get to say something about it before it's enacted.
Okay. I would like to ask that we direct staff to start thinking about policy statements in general. So that way we have more than just this as directing us. I think that's important for us to do.
Yeah, I think we need to have some sort of a legislative platform, right? And so we'll start the work of preparing that. It's not going to be super detail specific because we just don't have the staff to do that. We don't have lobbyists and all that. But we do need to have some kind of a legislative platform that'll let us respond quickly, particularly when bills come up, that we need to let our legislators know how we feel about that, and we don't have time to call a meeting. So we'll start working on that and get that done here quickly.
Okay. And maybe in the future we can handle things more in that way, but okay.
Okay.
All righty. Is there any other comments or questions on this topic?
Did you get public comment yet?
Nope, not yet. Is there public comment? Okay.
Gary Mappa. I live in Applegate. And even though I'm not in the city limits, I've been here since 1960. I went to high school here. And a lot of you may or may not know, I'm very concerned about housing. But this whole resolution thing is something I didn't even, because I don't pay attention. But this is the first I've heard of it. And I'm sitting here thinking, why aren't we proactive in paying attention to what's going on and not make a statement about a resolution we don't want to lose control? You're the city of Auburn. You control the city of Auburn. You should be paying attention to what the legislatures are doing with Senate bill this, ABA bill this, housing this, the county doing their rezone, and all of a sudden you got two beautiful parcels that make nice multifamily just got kicked off the list indirectly without the property owners even being able to defend their position. And that's fine. But it just, Nobody said anything about these two sites at any of the public hearings from these neighborhoods until they got approved. So nobody's paying attention. We as the city of Auburn should pay attention to what legislation's coming down the pike without having to tell the state of California, oh, we've got a resolution that we don't want to lose control. You lose control because you don't pay attention. This whole thing is a wake-up call. This whole rezone for Placer County, what's going on tonight. I look at this and go, you got to be kidding me. I shouldn't even be up here talking. You don't telegraph what you're going to do. You take control because you are who you are. You're the city of Auburn. You pay attention to legislation. What's going to affect you? You be proactive. Well, not for me because I'm not a citizen of Auburn, but you be proactive for the people that were here tonight and ward off the need for them to come down here, you know, grove of people that would never have come here if they would have paid attention to what was going on next door. So I don't know. Actually, I shouldn't even care. I don't care if you do it or not. But the minute you do it, you may lose grant money. You may lose the support of a couple of senators here and there or assemblymen because you publicly said, we don't want to lose control, whatever. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just for the record, we do, part of what we do with the League of Cities, obviously, is they are looking at all legislation that impacts cities. And, they keep us apprised. All of us, I think, get emails from them on different legislation and so forth. And if there's something that comes up, I think that we should take a stand on, I'll always let you know. But we do, we don't have a legislative director. I mean, that's an expensive, person to have on board to really do that, to all of the advocacy. We don't have a contract or anything for those kinds of services. We kind of do them ourselves. But we certainly, like I said, the League of Cities does keep us apprised on all the legislation that comes through that affects cities. And so, yeah.
Well, that's why you join those joint agencies, is because then you get the economies of scale.
That's right.
Having one staff person to look over everything and alert us if there's anything that would impact us. So,
And I think we're trying to be proactive. I'm just, again, I'm just concerned being part of a list and on a website for something that gives us nothing. I don't see what it does for us.
I am a little bit concerned on how our name gets used. So I'm okay with signing this. I don't know if I'm okay with being on the website. I'd like to have staff. If we sign this, we can sign this all we want to, but that doesn't necessarily, I don't think that gives them permission to put our name on a website saying that we're a part of a coalition.
We would share it with them if we want, we would share that with them.
Yeah, I think that we would want to get, we would want them to ask permission to put us on a website and us to look at that website and make sure that we agree with everything that's on there before any of that happens. Thank you.
Well, that's not clear then. So if we do sign that, then how will it be used? It sounds like it won't be used for anything other than.
I wouldn't.
The public document.
So my recommendation would be to make a motion to adopt the resolution and to just ask the staff to take a look at the website. I've looked at it. I could pull it up right now, but.
And it was part of our agenda packet to review. Just putting that out there.
I didn't look at exactly what they had put for.
So the way that the website is written, or the way that folks are listed on the website, it lists individually the council members. So like, for example, the city of Bradbury, I don't even know where honestly, I don't even know what that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, all 5 council members are listed here, which to me assumes that the council took action on that. So if you vote no, if there's a motion to move forward, council member votes no, obviously they can't have their name listed on here because it didn't vote to approve it. It doesn't list, let me double check this before I say this, but I don't think it lists specifically cities who have approved it. Let me double
The
check.
cities are listed. There's 81.
The individual cities are.
Yeah, individual cities, and then they have 670 elected officials that are listed under there as well.
All right.
But again, the intent is just developing a coalition. They're not going to be saying these
Yeah.
cities are in support of legislation. That's not what the purpose of the website is. It's just that we've taken, and again, just as a reminder, Colfax, Folsom, and Roseville, just in Placer County, have also adopted, or actually Folsom is in Sacramento County, sorry, but Colfax and Roseville have both adopted the same resolution and are listed on there. That doesn't mean that they're going to be using our name in support or against any legislation.
Yeah.
They don't have that authority.
There's a lot
so.
of coalitions that do that, so I just wanted to
Yeah,
make sure that we
yeah.
clarified that.
So again, I would make a motion that we adopt the resolution and direct staff to share that information with the website.
I'll second.
There's been a motion and a second. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
No.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Riddell Harris.
Aye. Okay, motion carries. Moving forward. So we have this letter. We'll probably need to amend the letter if Councilmember Amara does not want to be included.
Yes, and make sure that Councilwoman Amara's name is not on the website anywhere so that you. Absolutely.
Okay, moving on to the fiscal year 2023-24 mid-year fiscal status reports.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members. Hold on just a sec. Can you hear me?
While our finance consultant is working on this, just to introduce this item, Andy Heath is our finance consultant working for the city, worked here previously as our finance director, and we've been using him again while we're getting our new finance director up to speed. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andy.
Okay, can everybody hear me okay now?
Yes.
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 Okay, great. Okay. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. For the record, Andy Heath, financial consultant to the city. What I'd like to do for you tonight is actually share a presentation. I'll go through this presentation as quickly as I can. Most of you, actually all council members, have heard a lot of this in the briefings that we had to discuss the mid-year. And you'll be hearing a lot of the same information tonight, but you'll also be hearing some new information as well. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And we'll go right to the presentation. Here. Do all of you have the presentation in front of you?
Yes. Yes.
We can see
Okay,
it, but it's
great.
not in presentation mode, Andy.
It's not in presentation mode?
No, it's in
hold
editing
on.
mode.
There we go. Now we got it. That better?
Might take a second. Hasn't changed yet.
Nope, same.
Are we good?
Still same. But you
Still
can,
the same?
Fine with
you
non-presentation.
can, yeah, you can go through. We can see it.
Okay, that's good. Let me move it. All right, I'll go ahead and go through it. Okay, as part of tonight's presentation, what I'm going to do is actually go through the overview of the mid-year budget process. I'll give you an idea of what the general fund revenues and expenditures look like, and with that, the update to the general fund forecast that's put together every time more or less a fiscal update comes back to your city council. We'll look at the city's two enterprise funds, the airport fund and the sewer fund. And we'll talk about other special revenue funds. There's several that I thought your council needs to be aware of as we move forward for the balance of this fiscal year, more importantly, as the budget is put together for next year. And then I did put together a reconciliation of the American Rescue Plan Act, otherwise known as ARPA, and the funding status of that, where it sits at least right now. And then we'll talk about next year's budget development.
Andy, are you changing slides? Because we still see the title slide.
Yeah. Oh, you do? Okay, so.
We have it in front of us. You can just let us know what slide you're on and we can follow along.
Are you, okay.
Try unsharing.
Can you,
oh, there we go. Now it's switching.
okay, so it's, you know what, I've got the presentation open on 3 different screens, and it's unclear to me which one is the actual presentation you're seeing, but I know now, so
Close
we're good.
the other two.
Okay, so let me, yeah, okay. All right. So as part of tonight's process, I'm going to go over as part of the mid-year budget review process, actually. One thing that we did do was we reviewed and update the fiscal 22-23 activities. So you might recall that that is the fiscal year that was just finished. We have been preliminarily audited. We're completing the audit for that fiscal year 22-23. And with that information, we're able to come up with basically the fund balances for all of the funds that will likely ensue when that audit is completed for the year-end activity last year. And what those fund balance carryovers are. I was able to meet with every department head and every manager in the city, and thank you all for providing me the information I needed to put this together. To go over everything in terms of their operations, to update their baseline budget information for the remainder of the current fiscal year. And more importantly, add anything that they thought needed to be added to the budget. Specifically from a base perspective or a one-time perspective. We incorporated budget adjustments that have been approved by the City Council subsequent to the adoption of fiscal 23-24. So anytime your council actually considered something new as part of the current budget 23-24, things like granted positions for the police department, actually added that information back to the budget itself. We looked at revenue trends and forecasts and updated that information into the multi-year forecast. So that multi-year forecast is very critical. And as you'll see, there's a lot of fluidity in that. And there's a lot of things on tap in the future that the council needs to consider as future budgets are considered and put together. And then we'll look at the ARP expenditures today, as I mentioned. Looking at the general fund specifically, so for fiscal 23-24, you can see you essentially adopted a balanced budget. Revenues and expenditures are basically the same at $17,982,000. We went through and updated that information at mid-year and looked at everything that needed to change, or at least what is being recommended to the council for change currently for fiscal 23-24. The revenue amount is now $18.16 million. So we're proposing to add about $181,000 in revenue in the general fund. And then you can see on the expenditure side, we actually added just under $1.9 million and taking that appropriation authority up to $19.8 million. So essentially, you're adding a lot of expenditures in this budget, and we're going to go through exactly what those are. You're adding very minimal amount of revenue, but with that addition of the minimal amount of revenue, there's a lot of things that are changing, and we'll go through each one of those as well. Looking at those revenues, as I mentioned, we're anticipating an increase in revenue by the end of the year of about $181,000 more than originally budgeted. Some of the things that make that up include property taxes and in lieu property taxes going up by about $239,000. When the original budget was put together, we anticipate a secured valuation, and I think it was anticipated to be about 3 or 3.5%. When the budget was put together, it actually came in between 6 and 7%. So we're able to add property taxes back to the budget, about $239,000. We have another residual amount that is coming from former redevelopment tax increment. So as property values rise, also you have a rise in the former redevelopment area property taxes, which the city gets a portion of that is not needed for the wind down of the former redevelopment agency items. So another $26,000 there. Significant adjustment downward, however, for sales taxes. So the original sales tax budget had some assumptions in it, I believe, that essentially have not panned out in the first 6 months of the year. There were a lot of assumptions centered around fuel and fuel-based sales taxes that I believe 2 years ago and a year ago, there were actually a lot of anomalies that were built in to the way sales taxes were received on fuel, and that you had COVID going on, and the price of gas was really all over the place, going up and down. On the other hand, you had a lot of speculation in the fuel industry, particularly the card lock operation, where because the price of gas was fluctuating so much that there were certain trucking companies, et cetera, that were actually speculating and buying a lot of fuel up front. As a result of that, a lot of sales tax came into the city. It just has not panned out from quarter to quarter. And the most recent return for the period through December actually did show that. So we're lowering sales taxes consistent with also the HDL, Hinterleiter Delamis, sales tax consultants that the city's used for a number of years. This is actually consistent with what they believe the year-end results are going to be for sales tax in 23-24 as well. So downward adjustment in sales tax is $719,000. TOT, this is just a slight decrease in TOT, consistent with what's been received year to date. The budget was actually more than what was received last year, and we're experiencing TOT collections similar to what they were last year. So a slight downward adjustment there. Real property transfer taxes, slight increase there because houses continue to sell in Auburn or exchange hands. Franchise fees for both gas and electric and solid waste are increasing because of the significant increases that we're seeing in PG&E costs. As PG&E costs rise, Auburn gets a share of that franchise fee on an annual basis. And similarly, the recology rates have also gone up, which is increasing the franchise fee we receive from them. Building permits, another $50,000 there. Building just continues to, at least the permitting for building continues to scream in Auburn. So there's a lot going on in building. Some development is going on and not seeing that slow down. So we can easily add another $50,000 in building permits coming into the general fund. Interest earnings, as we all know, interest rates continue to be high. And as a result of that, the city's investment portfolio continues to benefit from those high interest rates. So with that, bringing the budget up by another $165,000 just in the general fund for interest earnings is consistent with what was received last year. Some other ones, tobacco grant. So this is the funding that's received from the tobacco settlement that is actually used for the, I believe, the SRO program, School Resource Officer program in the city's police department. So that funding is actually being added back or being added to the budget. It wasn't there before, $86,000. SACOG grant for the second phase of the form-based code. It was discussed a little bit earlier tonight, another item, another $150,000 there. So this is just a one-time addition of a grant. And what you'll see on the expenditure side also is a one-time addition on the expenditure side. ARPA recognition. So when we're able to use the ARPA money that is actually available to the city, we do have to recognize that as revenue in the fund that uses it, in the general fund in this case. This revenue recognition is specific to the police department, where the police department had expenditures that were actually appropriated last year in 22-23, but were not spent. So the police chief has had a conversation with me about moving that money over. So this is just money that was already budgeted previously as part of ARPA that is actually moving over into this year to offset the expenditures that should have happened last year or been accounted for last year. Strike team reimbursements. So there was a $200,000 net revenue reimbursement that was budgeted in the general fund for strike team. Strike team reimbursements essentially come from the state of California, and they offset the city's participation in the strike team, particularly overtime, which is the largest component of what's reimbursed. And then there's a small amount of admin and apparatus replacement that is actually part of that as well. $200,000 in the net is a lot of money. So we need to take that down to a more practical level. So I reduced that to $50,000. It remains to be seen whether or not that will come in as a net number by June 30th, but it remains to be seen. So, but lowering that by $150,000 is definitely the prudent thing to do. Auburn Fire Department grant, so there's $20,000. I believe this is a field break grant that came in for field break activity that is, again, a one-time in and a one-time out associated with fire activity in the field break. Another one-time monies that were received is actually for work that's already been done. It was paid for with the SV2 or the LEAP planning grants. So that $59,000 did come in, and it wasn't previously budgeted. Probably budgeted in a previous year. It didn't come over in the 23-24, but that money has been received and is in the books for the city. So we can add that back. Prop 68 grant is a parks-related grant that has to do with, I believe, a project for the Auburn School Park Preserve and an elevator project. So we're adding that on the revenue side for Prop 68 grant, 177 coming in, and then that's also added on the expenditure side as part of this mid-year adjustment. Post-training reimbursements, so these are for the police department for training reimbursements through post state training. 10,000 has come in. Engineering costs recovered. Again, whenever you have a high level of development, typically all the development fees roll with that. So this is just another one of those development fees that is experiencing an increase, 15,000 there. Transfers in are reduced. There was a transfer in that was budgeted in the general fund originally with the adopted budget that actually transferred in general fund reserves to use them. So I think it's a little bit more transparent to not show it that way, but rather show the use of actual reserves by having expenditures higher than revenues. So that's all this does, is it eliminates that transfer in. And then every other revenue source added together, some are pretty small, it's about another $24,000. So again, you can see here that although aggregate revenue adjustment is only about $181,000 for the general fund as a whole, there are multiple accounts that are impacting that $181,000 that really need conversation, because what that does, specifically for sales tax and property taxes and those sorts of things, is it trues them up from a base perspective so that you know exactly what you can anticipate receiving in the future. Based on some growth factor that is likely to ensue next year and every year after that. So it's really important to get the base right moving forward. Looking at the expenditures in the general fund. So again, the increase in appropriations that's recommended is just under $1.9 million, $1,839,000. With each department, I've kind of given you an idea of exactly what's going on. What I will say is that you'll see that many of the departments have actually a bullet point that indicates an increase in personnel costs. So when the budget was adopted, the city had a placeholder in a non-departmental appropriation in the general fund to actually cover the anticipated costs of future rate increases or the rate increases that would actually be provided to the employees. That cost was just over $500,000, and at the end of these expenditures, you'll see that I'm actually reducing that. So that $500,000 that was put in as a placeholder is now in the appropriations in each department. So where you see increases, especially in the police department and the fire department, the city's two largest departments, a lot of that is because you have that increase specific to their department for those raises. Nonetheless, City Council were able to reduce that budget by about just under $8,500, not a whole lot. And that is just based on an update to the benefit costs, where your council members are actually reimbursed for certain benefit costs over time. So when we extrapolate all that out, we're able to reduce that a little bit compared to what was actually budgeted. And then there was also a double counting of the budget for travel and training and conferences, those sorts of things. That just simply alone ensues. So we reduced a little bit there as well. For the city manager's office, reducing that just under $30,000. So there has been a management analyst that was in the city manager's office budget that has been vacant. Actually, it's vacant to this day. We're actually taking that management analyst and we're proposing to move that over to the finance department as a finance analyst, I believe, and moving that in there where it's probably better served and will serve more purpose. So in discussing that with the city manager, I've actually moved that out of the city manager's budget as part of this action But that position will be coming back and actually be recharacterized as a different position that I believe will come back to your council before that's done. But I have moved the appropriation from the city manager's office to the finance department. And then there's a one-time adjustment to contractual services that's actually been built in as well due to lower costs that are anticipated there. And you can see the note there at the bottom. We're looking at reclassing the position to a finance technician, which is a little bit less expensive than the management analyst that was in the city manager's office. And then again, today, that position remains vacant and will be vacant until the council approves the change in totality. Economic development, we're adding just under $270,000 worth of appropriations there. So in economic development, we have staff allocation costs that are being added back. There's an administrative assistant that wasn't fully budgeted as part of the original budget for economic development. That's been added back. And then you can see there's a couple of grant related costs that actually have a revenue side on one side, and now this is the expenditure side. So you see there that parks grant that's being added as an expenditure, $177,000, and then there's also a Safe Streets for All funding grant for $50,000 that's being added there. So that's to $269,000. City clerk, about $12,000 there, and that is pretty much all related to salary increases retro to July 1st, 2023. In finance, administrative services, you have salary increases that I mentioned at the outset of the expenditures. Contractual services, and this is related to the vacancies that this finance department has had over the last few months, and making sure that the work actually gets done, and then also additional background checks. And then I've also included what's called the CalPERS MEC, which stands for Minimum Employee Contribution, that is required to be paid by the city for all retired City of Auburn employees that are actually receiving a CalPERS health benefit. Although the city doesn't have to pay for the health benefit because the city doesn't offer that, there is a statutory requirement that the city pay what's called a minimum employee contribution for all those employees. That I believe is about, I'm going to say it's about $131 a month. So the city is billed monthly for that, and this is typically in the budget. It was not in the budget, so I'm adding that back as the MEC, and that's about $42,000 a year. City attorney, about a 10% increase in that budget from $300,000 to $330,000, and that's just an increase that's based on experience to date. Information technology, we have a little bit higher telephone communications costs, and then also the city has been working with Tyler off and on to start to implement the payroll module. So there's some additional costs there for that, but information technology, about $23,000 additional there. Human resources, actually had an opportunity to meet with the human resources director, and because her budget is a new budget, we actually went through and tried to really understand exactly what she thought she might need as a department head moving forward to provide services to the city in her new department. So much of that $20,000 is essentially a true up of her budget to bring it to what she believes is necessary. And then also she had some furniture purchases for staff in that budget as well. Police department, not a large increase there, about $193,000. And just some minor adjustments to the base budget. Simply, when the budget was originally put together, the base budget or the budget that you would need from year to year to continue to do business was simply set too low for things like uniform allowance, for things like fuel, because fuel prices remained high. Training, vehicle maintenance. So all of those categories, pretty much, you've got to make sure that that they're covered from year to year, and they don't fluctuate too much year to year, but for going up with inflation. So we adjusted those. Also, for the police department, a significant amount of salary increases were added back, but With that, there's also a significant amount of salary savings on the other side because in the police department, which is the largest department of the city, it's very difficult to keep all those positions filled for the entirety of the year. So you do have a component of salary savings that accrues. And then, as I mentioned, with the revenue side, we do have that rebudget of ARPA-funded expenditures from 22-23 that's actually built in on the expenditure side as well. Building inspection, $140,000 there. And this is just related to having a building official vacant for the majority of the fiscal year and offsetting that cost with a professional services costs that are necessary. So that's the $140,000 there. In the fire department, so you can see this is where essentially most of the increase in the appropriations, about 60% of the 1.8 million comes from. So another 1.1 million in the fire department. A lot of that has to do with approved salary increases that were budgeted as that in that placeholder, but I did move them over. We have a increased overtime due to vacancies that the department has had and coverage issues that the department must keep. So we have additional overtime that's being added back. Minor adjustments to the expenditure base also for uniform allowance, fuel, and professional services and vehicle maintenance, similar to the police department. And then you have what was not budgeted, at least in the budget document itself, and was assumed to come from reserves, and it was discussed as such for the one-time use of reserves for things like your SCBA gear, which I believe is about $300,000 worth of equipment. Fire station deferred maintenance, which is another significant amount as well. And then when the new fire truck was purchased, although the amount for the annual payment for the fire truck was added to the budget, the amount to outfit that fire truck with all the equipment that's necessary to get it on the street and get it operational was not added to the budget. So those three things, all of those things were assumed to come out of reserves with the 23-24 proposed budget. They just were not put in the budget that way. So I'm adding those back. Make sure that they're there. Building maintenance, another $55,000 there. Utilities budget was just simply too low. The fact of the matter is PG&E costs continue to rise even to this day. I just heard that yesterday PG&E is going to increase their costs again. So another increase is coming and PG&E costs continue to rise. So that budget is too low compared to last year even. In public works, so streets overlay, that transfer was increased out of the general fund from 50,000 to 565,000. And that is because for streets overlay, the city actually spent the money that was supposedly only allocated for 22-23, not only in 22-23, but in 23-24 as well. But I have an overlay slide in just a little bit that I'm going to show you that shows you exactly how much the city has put towards overlay over the last 3 years, and that's where this story will tell itself. But essentially, that money is in the ground, it's in the streets, and that money actually was spent this year as well. But in public works, you see that we're only adding 327,000. So although the overlay component increased 515, and you have salary retro increases in public works as well, you had a significant amount of funding that was allocated to an engineer position. And the other position that was in public works admin that wasn't properly transferred to other funds, specifically funds that have capital projects in them. As a result of that, that budget was significantly inflated with the adopted budget. So I've trued all that up, and then with that, I've actually added an associate engineer position to that budget that I've had a conversation with the director of public works about, and then adjusted the budget for incorrect cost allocations to true all those up, and then eliminated that vacant engineer position that covers that. The other things in public works are just increased stormwater costs. There simply was not enough budgeted for permit fees and district charges that are basically incurred on an annual basis. For non-departmental, you can see here, I'm actually reducing that budget by $558,000, and that is that labor placeholder that I was talking about. So when the budget was put together, that $558,000 appropriation was actually added to the budget, not knowing, ultimately how much it would cost each department. Well, we know all that now, so I built that into every department, and I'm reducing it here in the general fund. Assuming all that comes to fruition, so assuming we actually, bring in the additional $181,000 in the general fund for revenue, and assuming we spend the $1.8 million in addition to what was originally budgeted for the 23-24 adopted budget, you will end the year with just over $5.3 million in reserves. Okay, that $5.3 million in reserves is essentially made up of an economic contingency reserve of $3.16 million. You have a pension unfunded liability reserve, which may come in handy, as you'll see next year, for $1 million. Prepaid insurance costs, $577,000 there. Employee unfunded liability reserve, which is for employees as they leave, payouts and those sorts of things, $500,000 there. And then your unobligated fund balance will be low at about $111,000. So when you take all the types of reserves that your council has discussed and has agreed to set up, and you subtract those out of your total fund balance that will remain at the end of this year, assuming everything I just went over comes to fruition, you only have about $111,000 remaining of the $5.3 million. That $5.3 million represents about 30.4% of the fiscal 23-24 adjusted base expenditures. So keep in mind that when we talk about the adjusted expenditures being 18, 19 million, whatever that number is now, these base expenditures exclude all the one-time stuff because you want to see what percentage of your budget is covered from an ongoing perspective. So that's about $2.2 million in one-time appropriations that are built into 23-24 now. So when you take those out, that $5.3 million covers about 30% of the budget. Looking at the forecast, this is the forecast for the future. And you can see there are a few years. The first 5 years are years that are essentially completed. So I'm going to focus on the third year there, which is fiscal 2021, the fourth year, fiscal 21-22. Those are COVID years. And from my perspective, they're off limits. Okay. Nothing was consistent during COVID. And to use these years in any way, shape, or form as any foundation for forecasting the future is simply not a good idea. As you know, during COVID, there was a lot going on. You had shutdowns in government. You had shutdowns in the economy. You had stay-at-home orders. People couldn't go out. Businesses had to close. There was just a lot going on that really prevented economic activity, at least from a consumer point of view, to take place. So that was going on. Government was actually, most of the governments that I've been engaged with over the last several years actually have incurred significant amounts of surpluses because they simply were not spending the money. Number one, you were getting money from the government to spend. And then number two, you weren't spending your own money. But with that being said, you were still bringing money in. Property taxes did not decrease. In fact, they went up. Sales taxes, we thought would take a major hit during COVID. But guess what? They didn't. Okay. And they continued to come in. Every other source of revenue continued to come into the city. But you weren't spending the money like you were spending it before. And that's why in 2021 and in 21-22, and especially for the city of Auburn, where 40+% of your sales tax base comes from fuel, and because fuel went through the roof during COVID and it was super high from a cost perspective, you had huge surpluses that resulted in those years. So those 2 years are absolutely anomalies to the city of Auburn. When you parlay 2 years forward, 2 years ago and in the current year, you can see now we're anticipating, well, in 22-23, the city did use just over $1.5 million of that fund balance. There was a lot of one-time stuff that was actually done in 22-23. Things like the Sunrise Ridge Circle, storm sewer, projects like that were actually done, and a lot of money was spent towards those activities. In 23-24, when we adjust the budget based on what I just discussed for the general fund, you see that the city is anticipating now using another 1.6 million. So the two surpluses that actually resulted in 2021 and 21-22 are being used in 22-23 and 23-24. Take all that one-time activity out, and when you're left with a base budget, which is just essentially what it takes to fill all the positions that are currently authorized, and assuming certain assumption factors for both revenues and expenditures moving forward, you can see that the city has a deficit issue starting next year of about $800,000, and it fluctuates between $700,000 and $800,000 for essentially the next 4 years. These forecasts, again, are based on a base budget concept. It assumes that all positions that are currently authorized are filled for the entirety of the fiscal year. So if you have any positions that are vacant, that are currently on the books, and you even have some today that remain vacant in any one of these future years, that's actually going to reduce that red number, okay? Because that's salary savings, basically. These numbers also include the 3 units that have a negotiated salary increase starting on July 1st, 2024. So those are built in. However, there are no increases for COLAs built in for any year after that. Again, all positions are budgeted, are filled for the entirety of the year, including positions that are funded by grants today. So when those grants expire, this budget assumes, or this forecast assumes, that those positions remain filled. To the extent you don't fill those positions, when that grant expires, then that is also a savings to this budget in that fiscal year. Here's the kicker, okay? CalPERS costs will grow from $300,000 starting next year to $1 million in 4 years out in fiscal 28-29. These are CalPERS UAL costs. And one might ask, wait a minute, I thought we did a bond. I thought we financed our entire UAL and actually got out from under having these big fluctuating CalPERS UAL costs from year to year. Well, you did. However, what hasn't happened is CalPERS has not met up with their end of the bargain to actually make the investment returns, at least over the last couple of years, to the point where they're meeting their discount rate. So their discount rate in their portfolio is 6.8% right now. And for the last 2 years, well, 2 years ago, it was negative. Their ultimate annual return was negative, and last year it did not meet 6.8%. This year, I'm told right now, it's about 8.1%. That's hearsay right now. I don't have any documentation supporting that, but I have heard that. So hopefully by the end of the year, they do beat that 6.8%. But nonetheless, the current actuarials that came out in August, just this last August, show that you will have a UAL payment for starting next year again for the foreseeable future. And here's what that UAL payment looks like. So you can see here in the first 5 bars, which actually go through the end of last year, you can see the UAL component is that orange portion, okay? And before we did the bond, that orange portion was significantly increasing year after year after year. That's why you did the bond. When you did the bond, it shrunk it. So in 21-22, you can see what you paid there. And then because all CalPERS actuarials lag, and you did your bond in 21-22, you actually had one more year of the UAL in 22-23. And then you can see in the current year that UAL completely went away. Okay? That's because the orange bar was replaced with more green bar, which is your pension obligation bond debt service. You can see moving forward, that debt service number, that green bar number, is very consistent. In fact, it's the same amount every year. It's because you're paying a fixed cost on the CalPERS debt. But what you also see starting next year in 24-25 is a new orange bar. Okay, so that orange bar comes back and that orange bar grows. The value of the orange bar in 24-25 is about 300 grand, and the value of the orange bar in 28-29 is about $1 million. Okay, these numbers are right out of the CalPERS actuary reports, and again, these reports lag 2 years. So we need to be hopeful that starting this year and every year in the future, the CalPERS starts to make their discount rate, or these orange bars could continue to get out of hand. Where you're going to be paying out of the general fund in the current year, about $2.174 million for all CalPERS costs combined. 5 years from now, you'll be paying just over $1 million more at just under 3.3 million. This is the forecast, and that is what's driving these negative numbers for the most part. Okay? Very important to understand that. Okay, I'm going to move on now and quickly go through some of the other funds. For the airport fund, so these are the city's enterprise funds. Airport fund, not a whole lot going on. Recommending a downward adjustment in revenues of about 164,000. Upward adjustment in expenditures of about 388,000. Assuming all of that comes to fruition by the end of the fiscal year, in a few months, the airport fund will still have about $2.14 million in fund balance or working capital available to it. Some of the changes in revenue are just decreases, and I worked with Ty on this, the airport manager. Decreases in state and federal grant sources, just that they're not going to either materialize or they're not needed for certain projects that won't be undertaken. They're offset by increases in lease revenues, which we're able to increase, and interest earnings, which has happened in most funds because interest rates have gone up so much. In the airport fund, you have increased staffing allocations, making up a large component of the expenditure increase, particularly for the airport manager. And then you have an allocation of 50% of the economic development staffing that's also allocated to the airport as well. Some of the larger capital projects in the airport include the helicopter parking area and the completion of that project, and then the airport master plan update. And when you look at the net margin, which is essentially all the ongoing revenue that you bring into the airport, less all the ongoing expenditures it takes to run the airport. So basically everything except for capital. And you compare those two, you always want to see more revenue than expenditures. And that's basically what you're able to contribute to capital every year. But that amount is down to $36,000. And that's because there's a lot of allocations of staff that are being taken from the airport now. So 36,000 is the net margin. In the sewer fund, recommended adjustment of revenue, about 270,000 more in revenue, 300,000 more in expenditures. So pretty close to same budget there. Like the airport, the sewer fund will have on June 30th, 2024, assuming all of that comes to fruition, just over $8.2 million in fund balance or working capital. 1.9 million of that 8.2 million is reserved for things like debt service, and it's also a connection fee reserve. The connection fee reserve can be used pretty much for any airport capital project or sewer fund capital project. So you still have that set aside, but those can be appropriated for pretty much any capital project. Recommendations, so revenues are higher due to increased receipts of sewer connection fees. So we don't budget those, or typically we don't budget those at the outset of the fiscal year, but recognize them as they come in because they're sporadic. So part of that increase is because you have sewer connection fees that are higher than budget, and interest earnings. Expenditures are higher, excuse me, due to contractual costs for plant operation. Budgeted was too low. So the city does contract out the operation of the plant. And when that budget was originally put together, it was put together too low. and higher anticipated capital. Some of the larger capital projects in the sewer fund include lift station repairs and projects, SSMP master plan update, annual sewer collection system rehabilitation, and sludge dewatering. Always a lot going on in the sewer fund. And then when you look at the sewer fund net margin, ongoing revenues less ongoing expenditures, you have 2.4 million there, which is a healthy amount to add for capital every year, because candidly, the airport or the sewer fund does need that money every year. Gas tax fund. So on the gas tax fund, you have about a $33,000 decrease in revenue, and a $69,000 increase in expenditures. You can see that I'm projecting a negative fund balance right now in the gas tax fund, but this is a super fluid. And I had to kind of pick a fund on which fund I wanted to show in the negative because of the overlay issue that I mentioned earlier. So ultimately, hopefully, that $61,000 negative fund balance does not materialize, and we won't need that. But if it does, you can always use next year's gas tax for expenditures that are incurred now. Revenues are adjusted to account for anticipated decreases in gas taxes collected. And this is just consistent with information that's available from a website that's put together by Michael Coleman, who is a contributor to the League of California Cities and has been arguably one of the leading experts in California finance for as long as I've had my career, 34 years. So he puts together a very robust, great website with a lot of estimates. So get this information right from his website. Expenditures are updated to include over expenditures for street overlay, as I mentioned, and I'll show you that slide in just a couple of slides. And then higher PG&E costs. So in the gas tax fund, the city has its streetlight program. So when PG&E costs rise, costs in the gas tax fund rise as well. And then again, the negative fund balance hopefully will be mitigated by the end of the year with increased revenue collections. Otherwise, will be covered by next year's gas tax. A transportation fund. In the transportation fund, have a $534,000 increase in revenue, $586,000 increase in expenditures, no projected fund balance in the transportation fund. Revenues are increased to account for the street overlay allocation that the general fund is actually increasing, that's paid for out of the transportation fund. So you recall that there's $515,000 more that needs to come to pay for overlay. That money is actually transferred into the transportation fund as a source. So that's the majority of that. And then there was a slight, and we also had an increase in the regional service transportation program money that we found out that we were receiving when we were putting the mid-year together. So that's been added back. And all of that is offset by a decrease in the amount of TDA, LTF that can be allocated to the transportation fund that's needed by both transit and transportation. And again, expenditures are increased to cover the over expenditure for overlay. This is the overlay. So if you go back, including the current fiscal year, 3 fiscal years, you can see that over that 3-year period, the city has spent a total 3-year average of about $1.17 million per year. So that's just about $3.5 million that's been put into the streets over the last 3 years, including current fiscal year. So 2 years ago, put 162,000 in. That's because we carried over a significant amount of overlay money to be spent in 22-23. So just under $2.5 million was put into the ground in fiscal 22-23. And you can see again, we spent another almost $1 million so far this year in the first 6 months, basically. $911,000 was spent year to date in the current year, because part of that 22-23 that was spent was actually thought to have been appropriated in 23-24 as well, so it was spent again. Nonetheless, this city of Auburn has averaged just under $1.2 million a year for the last 3 fiscal years in overlay. Moving on to the city's transit fund, adding about $87,000 in revenue to the transit fund, lowering expenditures by $26,000. Expect to have about $100,000 in the transit fund by the end of the year. Again, this is one of those very fluid funds. Fund that should never have a negative fund balance because it should self-balance itself every year. Revenues are higher because of the increase in the TDA LTF allocation. You also have other ancillary revenues that are due to come in from CRRSSA, ARPA, and CCAP. And then I also, working with the transit manager and the public works director, reduced the need to buy a new bus. So that's actually taken out of the budget. Expenditures are decreased slightly because you have reduced capital costs for the bus that are offset by increases in personnel and adding the CalPERS pension bond costs. So because transit fund has a component of staff in it, they're responsible for, I believe, I want to say it's like 6% of the CalPERS pension bond. So that's been added back. That was not budgeted originally. And then the transit fund balance expected to be positive, reducing the need for TD LTF in the future. So if transit does not need that $100,000 next year, it'll reduce the amount of TDA that's needed next year and actually allow that TDA money to accrue to the transportation fund that can be used for other transportation related projects. CDBG defederalized fund. So this is a fund that is actually a memo fund to the general fund, meaning it's kind of part of the general fund, but we show it separately. But these are monies that are received whenever you receive less than $35,000 a year in loan repayments from your CDBG business use program. You're able to what's called defederalize that money, or basically take it out of the federal system. You no longer need to loan that money out, and you no longer need to give that money back to the state or the federal government. You can keep that money. So we've been doing that for several years now. And in this fund, at the end of this year, I expect that the city will have in the defederalized fund balance about just over $180,000. So these funds can be used for any purpose desired by the city. So these revenues have been right around $35,000 each year, about $33,000. So as long as they stay below 35, you can defederalize them. Once they go above 35, you can't defederalize anything. You can't even defederalize 35. You get nothing. So these monies are available, however. The only thing that's really appropriated out of this fund right now, which is that $4,000 that you see, are expenditures to cover applicable administrative costs associated with the loan programs that you currently have. So a small amount goes to that. And again, these funds can be used for any purpose. Property seizure fund, this is basically your police asset forfeiture fund. So revenues, not changing those. We have not received $50,000 yet this year. Expenditures increasing a little bit by $22,000 to $87,000. Assuming we spend that full $87,000 and bring in the $50,000, we will still have just over $180,000 remaining in the property seizure fund at the end of the current fiscal year. And these revenues represent disbursements to the city or paid to the city for participation on countywide task force teams through the police department. And these funds have historically typically been used for the annual lease costs or to cover annual lease costs for police vehicles. And a new lease was just executed. It started this month, March of 2024. The first payment's due this month. And that has been added back, and that's what that $22,000 represents. Closed landfill funds. So you can see here, recommending an upward adjustment to revenue, about $20,000 there. And then another $300,000 in expenditures. The expenditure budget was simply far too low. Assuming all of that has been spent, and we bring in the $280,000, the closed landfill fund will have just under $900,000 of negative fund balance by the end of the year. The revenues are higher, essentially due to your ecology rate increase that was not added in. And expenditures are higher based on what we believe the actual costs expected to be incurred by the end of the year in the closed landfill fund are to be, and those are for things like permit compliance, insurance, wastewater fees. And it was a very wet year too, so that wastewater bill could be significantly high. Consultant costs and recology operating costs to manage the closed landfill. So all of those things are paid for on an annual basis. And unfortunately, the amount that comes into the closed landfill fund has historically over the last several years not been sufficient to cover those typical recurring costs. I do know that the city council is aware of this, and I do know that staff is working with a team of consultants to address this issue. But nonetheless, as part of the mid-year process, we have to present what the reality ultimately may be. Okay, let's see here. And then this is the ARPA true up. So what I've done here is I've actually given you a snapshot of what 23-24, the current year, is looking like. And the you have the business associations on there. In the middle column, you can see what's been spent to date in fiscal 23-24. And then what the remaining budget is. So this is taken right out of the budget document, at least the top half of it is. Then there are three kind of newer projects that I didn't see specifically mentioned in the budget, at least with an appropriated amount. But I know that that ARPA funds are being used to fund these things. So those are your general plan update, which so far year to date has about $139,000 spent. Your wayfinding plan, about $33,000 spent there. And then there was a small expenditure for Central Square Park, $6,800 there. I further assumed that the general plan update would have about $1 million allocated to it, and the wayfinding plan would have about $100,000. Assuming those are correct, the city, assuming all of that money is spent for the upper items, Old Town Business Association, downtown, Canyon Project, Carnegie Library, etc. For the budgets that were actually in the budget when you adopted it, you will still have at the end of the day just under $60,000 remaining in your ARPA allocation. So if any of this does change, then obviously that ARPA amount fluctuates. But I just wanted to show you, at least from what I was able to see in the budget, where I thought the city stood with respect to how much ARPA funds did remain. Some of the things to consider for next year as the budget is put together. So the economy, again, we just need to monitor it closely. It's a very fluid economy right now. And the more frequent you can do an update to the forecast, the better, with true good numbers, bringing in salary savings numbers and really understanding what that looks like. Especially if there's positions that have been vacant for some time and you find out that, you know, maybe you can keep them vacant and actually accrue more savings long-term to the general fund. Use of all ARPA funding needs to be done by December of 2026. So although that's a couple of years down the road, it's not that far away. CalPERS investment returns and unfunded liability payments. We talked about that a little bit, making sure, you know, CalPERS is doing their best to make that 6.8% discount rate, and then paying very close attention to ultimately what the investment rates that they do attain, the impact that they have on the unfunded liability payments to the city of Auburn. Citywide insurance costs, particularly general liability and workers' compensation, been made aware from NCCSIF, the Northern California City Self-Insurance Fund, which actually manages the city's workers' compensation and GL insurance. We've been made aware by them that these costs will be increasing. So don't know what those specifically look like yet. They'll come out soon, but you can expect to see probably some costs being added to the general fund and the sewer fund for both of those programs. And then the ability to sustain the desired level of service delivery. So the base budget is built around a set of positions that is authorized by your council under the presumption that your council has agreed to fill those positions predicated on delivery of a service level. So that's the way this budget is set up. That's the way the forecast is set up. And should that change, we would want to know what that looks like moving forward. Last slide, tentative budget development process calendar. So as we move forward, we will continue to have internal departmental budget developments with all the departments. So had a very good session with each of the department heads and the managers, as I mentioned. And now we need to build on that and really start digging down into their budgets and understanding, especially with the new finance director on board, exactly what those budgets look like as we move forward. And we'll be doing that this month and next month. It's anticipated that your council will likely want budget workshops, and we're earmarking at least this point in time, May 2024, to have those, where we'll look at things like the budget requests from the citywide committees and commissions. So, and by the way, for the committees and commissions, nothing was changed in those budgets. So it's just assumed that whatever their budget was that was adopted happens and stays the same through the end of at least the current year. We'll also look at, as part of those workshops, review the departmental programs and staffing augmentations to the extent we have, additions of staff or non-additions of staff. And then we'll look at the base budget update itself and an update to the forecast to ultimately lead to June 2024, where we'll consider the fiscal 24-25 budget. And your council could use any number of meetings in June to actually do that. That is it. I am done. And I think with that, if your council has any questions for me or for staff, who I believe is there, I'll be happy to answer that.
I just wanted to add a couple of things quickly. So we do have our new finance director, Gretchen Johnson, who's in the audience here listening in. And so she's already been texting me during the meeting about things I knew we need to focus on next year. Andy, can you go back to the slide that shows the upcoming fiscal year deficits?
Yes.
With the bars and the yellow, the orange and the blue. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that one. So from my perspective, looking at $800,000 structural deficit is not a good thing, obviously, for us to be looking at right now. And so for this upcoming budget, we're already starting to have conversations with department directors on what we're going to do to address that. Gretchen and I have been talking off and on about how we're going to address that and bring forward a budget that's balanced to council and isn't relying on reserves to balance. So I just want you to know that we're working on that. We're looking at that. We're going to have discussions about this tomorrow during our staff meeting as well with the department directors. And so staff and the department heads are focusing on that and making sure those $800,000 deficits are addressed. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understand that we're certainly taking this extremely seriously. And Gretchen hasn't left yet, so that's good.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your presentation. Council, do you have any questions? No, not this time.
I just have one to our city manager. So, yeah, we're looking at ways to decrease our expenditures, but are we looking also at ways to increase our revenue?
I don't want to say a three-pronged stool. It probably will be a three-legged stool, not pronged stool, right? So increasing revenue, whether it's through economic development, whatever that is, expense reduction, certainly, because we're not going to be able to raise enough revenue to increase just like by next year, right? But then there's also other things that we need to look at. Like one of the strategies that we need to look at is right now we don't have, our TOT is only 8%, right? The rest of the areas, not from Auburn up, but from like, I think Loomis down, it's at least 10. So that's a revenue source that we need to tap into. That does need to go to voters, and we need to look at that kind of stuff and figure that out. But we also aren't getting TOT tax on Airbnbs. If you go on Airbnb right now, there's like 80 of them in the city. I think it's like 80 in the city limits. It's a lot. That's a lot of money that we're leaving on the table that we need to get that resolved as well. That also, I think, needs to go to voters. So there's multiple things that we're looking at. Council has talked about cannabis in the past as well. And however that all shakes out, when we bring that forward to council, but we are looking at ways to increase revenue. None of that's going to be done by July, right? July 1st, when we approve the budget for the upcoming year. So right now we're looking at expense reduction to make sure that we're coming under at budget. So we don't have a negative amount going forward. And then outgoing years, we need to look at increasing revenue to bolster that.
Good, I appreciate that because I don't like to be in a situation where we're just cut,
Right.
and we're not looking how we can increase our revenues in the future. Thank you, I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
right.
Councilwoman Doug, do you have anything?
I have probably more thoughts than really questions, but I guess I'll just say that, you know, I did notice that we kind of went over budget in a lot of different areas, just, you know, even if it was $10,000 or what have you. So, and sometimes that can't be helped, but I just really look forward to a much cleaner and more accurate accounting of our dollars going forward. And I know that we have commitment from staff and changes have been made to alleviate some of the issues that were catalyst to where we are today. Just leave it there.
I made a comment to meddlers last week that it's important to have the people in these type of positions who are the right people. And I'll just leave that at that as well.
I think that the hard thing and the good thing about small cities is that they provide an opportunity for people to move up a level toward a larger organization, to maybe try something new and move up to a different position than they had been in before. And sometimes in our experience, that's worked out great many times, but sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes we have to learn that lesson, and then we have to, you know, figure things out and move forward. So I think that that's kind of where we were, and now we're adjusting, we're getting the right people in the seats in the bus, and we're going to move forward with that. So I appreciate that. I think, Sean, I think you've done a great job of looking at our staff and making sure we have the right staff in the right places. And I appreciate all the work that you've done on that as well. I wanted to echo what Councilwoman Amara said, is that I think it's about driving up revenue as well. We've talked kind of in nebulous terms about us needing more revenue. I don't know if we want to actually put a plan in place with some dates and have us all kind of be on the same page, so there's some more accountability to actually getting those things implemented versus us kind of talking in a nebulous way that could happen at some point.
On the revenue side,
Mm-hmm.
I think part of the budget discussion is going to be that, right? And so, you know, if we were going to do some sort of a tax measure, TOT, for example, that the next one that we could potentially do anything would be November, and looking at creating a campaign and making sure that we're getting, because it's not, there's a I think a misperception that TOT increase is going to hit everybody in the city, and that's not the way that works. You pay TOT if you're staying in a hotel from outside of the city, not if you live here. Unfortunately, folks that live here have to vote for it, or fortunately, I guess, depending on the way you look at it. Trying to figure out if we're going to be able to make November 2024 is something that I'm going to start working on right now with, a campaign consultant who I know pretty well and who will work for free for me for a couple of days or something. The county is also potentially looking at that, and we don't want to do ours ahead of theirs. They should be at the same time. And so I need to work closely with them and figure out what they're going to do as well.
Seems that the city's also had a habit in the past of kind of waiting too late and
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
throwing something together at the last minute that then wasn't successful.
it failed.
So I'd rather have something planned out and something that we go around and get buy-in from everyone first so we can be successful versus kind of throwing it at the
Yeah,
last minute. So
agreed 100%.
I
Agreed
appreciate
100%.
that. The other thing I want to make sure that we're just my thoughts in general is that in the past, the city has their way that they've dealt with any kind of issues and with the budget is just drastically decreasing staff, not giving raises, things like that. And that's really hindered our ability to move forward as a community and as a city. And it's really impacted staff's ability to get their job done, because then they don't have enough people and then they're just putting out fires, and we're not doing the planning and all of the other things that we're now making up for and probably are part of our costs that we're paying for later versus paying for when we probably should have. So I just want to make sure that we want to look at cuts, but we also want to look at the right cuts and not
Right.
just, hey, every department needs to cut 10% or needs to cut so many people, but being strategic in the way that we're cutting.
Yeah, I talked before about that. I've been doing this sort of like organizational overview and figuring out if we have the right people in the right places and staffing and all that. I mean, this is really the catalyst for even more of that, right? So that's going to be part of the budget process going forward to bring it forward to council in May. We need to start doing that. We're gonna start on that this upcoming week here and moving into the end of March. So we are gonna be looking forward. I think that there's going to need to be a lot of kind of scrutinization of individual budgets as well, and figuring out who is well, just looking at different budgets, each budget individually, and making sure not starting like at a zero-based budget, because personnel costs kind of our personnel costs, but we do need to look and see, make sure that there's each department is getting the adequate amount of money that they need to provide the services that council is giving us direction to provide. And if we can't make that, we need to bring that back and talk about it.
In the past, we had done kind of workshops for each department or each group of departments, and where we kind of went through it all before the budget. So that way we weren't kind of trying to do it all at the end of June, and it was kind of a lot for us to take in a big bunch. So I really enjoyed kind of breaking it down over several meetings versus having it kind of all come to us at the end. So if we could pursue something like that would.
Yeah, Andy's proposal is to start doing budget workshops in May. So we do each council meeting have one, something May, June, with the final adoption at the second meeting in June.
Okay. And I like the workshop. If we could do it either before or after, so it's a workshop rather than a formal item, that makes it so we can have more of a conversation. I think that's great. I think those were the main, the one thing I would want when we come back is, it was with talking about the budget, it would be interesting to see the staffing numbers by department and how they change between 2024 and 2029. Cause I know there's a lot of assumptions that go into some of those numbers. And I'm just really interested to see, like, are we keeping everything exactly the same? Are we putting more people? Are we taking people out that have been based on grants? There's all kinds of nuances to that. So because we're going to need to do raises sometime in that time frame too. So I want to kind of get a sense of where we are when it comes to, I know that we always talk about staffing as staffing, but that's the biggest part of our
Sure.
budget. So I'd
Right.
really like to dive into that a little bit more and kind of get a better idea of where that.
We'll bring back the historical data that we can. I'll be honest with you, going back and looking at our past budgets, there's not a very clear like position control document. So this, yeah, there's right. So this past budget, we did that. It wasn't done the way that I wanted it to be done, but it was at least something. And so this next one will be a better snapshot of that, going back probably 5 years for each department and each position, because we need to know, like, if fire has 500 people allocated to them, but whatever, they can't have 501. They can have 500, whatever that is, right? And the way it was done this year, at least, is not very clear to me, even though there's an actual document in there, because it wasn't updated at the end. And so we got to go back and figure it out, make sure that we have what we're supposed to have. Jen in HR has been tracking that internally on her side. And so she has a better kind of grasp on that, I think, than what's actually in the budget document.
I'd also like to get the CIP, line them out with the projects that are included in that. I think that's really important. I know that we really need a new street sweeper and a few other things. And so I just want to make sure that we're thinking that all the way through, and that we're not necessarily doing the CIP by department, but by the departments that have the most need. Because sometimes it just is, oh, what's your CIP stuff? You only get this much of the CIP. And I think that we need to be looking at the whole city and all the different items and kind of prioritizing them against each other and not just doing things by department.
And we do have the reserves for, we set aside a new reserve account for equipment like that.
Yep.
Like street sweepers and things like that. Thank goodness.
Yep. So, okay. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Andy, thank you so much for your report. Did anyone else on council have anything else? Okay.
I just wanted to finish up. I wanted to thank Andy and also staff for putting together this this report. It's not great news. It's unfortunate. It is what it is. I was hoping, as you know, I had indicated that I wanted to see some funds for the Fire Safe Council during mid-year, and I'm not sure how we can make that happen when we've got such a big deficit looming. I am concerned about fire, and I know that we're going to talk about that in the upcoming budget. But I'm just very concerned about that. from a fiscal perspective and impacts that we're going to have, so I'll be watching that very carefully. I want to be able to support as much as we can, so.
I think we all agree with that. Okay, thank you so much. Moving on to,
King.
oh, yes.
Um,
Oh,
There is a resolution to adopt.
oh, there is. Sorry. I apologize.
We also need public comment.
Oh, sorry.
It's
It's getting late. Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to close public comment and I'm going to bring it back to council.
Madam Mayor, I will move by resolution that we increase the estimate for earned revenue in the city's general fund by $181,132 to $18,163. $18,163,182. Oh my gosh.
We can just say we move for the
Yes,
recommendation.
why don't I
Best
just say this?
recommendation.
I will just say that we move by resolution to adopt the recommendations as proposed by staff.
Perfect.
Second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Councilmember Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Amara.
Yes.
Holmes.
Aye.
Sarah Sammons.
Aye.
Mayor Badell Harris.
Hi. All right, now we're moving on. Okay, moving on to city manager's report.
So I'm going to keep this quick since we have the closed session coming up as well. A couple things. Rachel Wells, the supervisor of the city's transit department, has announced her retirement from the city on August 2nd after nearly 2 decades of service.
Wow.
Yeah, so she started as a part-time employee and since become an integral part of the department. It's a big loss for us. You may have noticed that the sidewalk and curb area along High Street is covered with trench plate and barricades. City staff and a construction crew that were working on a sewer line replacement at that location discovered the remnants of an underground storage tank, actually underground storage tanks, plural, that were buried under the sidewalk. We think those are related to a former car dealership and repair shop. So we are working with Placer County Environmental Health on that. We called them pretty much immediately and are working with them to ensure that that's dealt with safely and in an environmentally friendly way. One other thing, I was able to participate in the Auburn 49ers Lions Club Celebrity Chef event this past Thursday, along with City Clerk Amy Lind. Our police department was there. Councilmember Dowden Calvillo was there. Auburn Hurricane Latta was there. So that was just kind of a really cool, really neat event. I smoked 24 pounds of pulled pork that I put on at 3 o'clock in the morning for 11 hours. And my pulled pork slider sold out like really quickly. So my daughter said that my pulled pork slayed, and I guess she was, so she was right. Yeah.
Yes, my daughter said that the other day. Oh, that's fire.
Slayed. And then lastly, Auburn Fire Department just brought on a new administrative volunteer, Jeff Mickles. He's an Auburn resident, brings with him extensive public and private sector experience. We're looking forward to working with him. We'll have some more information on that coming up. That's it.
Since it's late, if there's anything in particular that council wants to do for council reports, that's urgent.
Madam Mayor, for PCTPA, there was a couple things I just wanted you to be aware of. We touched upon this just very briefly, but the PCTPA did take action with regards to the airport land use and the rezoning out there near the airport. There were 13 sites, really 11, because 2 were divided, that the county was proposing to change to high density housing that were around the airport. After a lot of discussion and deliberation, and Jonathan was there to testify, which we appreciated. We kind of gave them an opportunity to chat with staff, trying to come up with some kind of compromise. I had suggested that we move forward with just the rezoning of 2 particular sites, but my colleagues felt differently. And because the airport land use plan had already been adopted in 2021, this action was just finding that the rezone would be consistent with that airport land use plan. So they did move forward to rezone 11 of those properties that are located within the Auburn Airport influence area. There was a change, no residential for C1 and Site 43. Otherwise, all the rest of the sites were found to be consistent. I was a no vote, as was Supervisor Suzanne Jones. Both of us voted no, but that did happen. Also, just wanted to let you know that we've been discussing this for quite some time, but the transportation sales tax proposal, which would basically place a 0.5 cent transportation sales tax measure on the November 2024 ballot. Staff are moving forward and they will be securing approval from the jurisdictions where the tax would occur, which would not be in Auburn, Loomis, or Colfax. So it's really South Placer. But they're going to talk with those jurisdictions, but there might be some discussion here, people thinking that that would be something that we would be voting on and we would not be. It would be bifurcated, but they're looking to raise $41 million annually for transportation projects and specifically with regards to 65. So just to kind of let you know those things, I want to make sure you had that information.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, the rest I'll save.
Okay. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mike.
Yes,
You have
well, yeah, I've been meeting with a couple of property owners in Old Town. And I'm concerned that there's several businesses that are either closing or planning to close. So I'm meeting with the property owners to see if they've got some suggestions on how we can regenerate that area. So also I met with the new general manager for ecology, and I guess he's wants to meet with the city manager here very soon. So, but we did talk about the waste. What's that? The landfill. Yes, about getting that issue resolved. But he's going to come and talk to the city manager.
Thank you. Councilwoman Sarah Simmons?
And just real brief, I attended last week's ARD meeting where Jonathan and Barry gave a presentation to the ARD board for our general plan update. And hopefully we'll be able to get some collaboration and try to convince them to take the survey right then and there. I think it's going to take a little more pushing, but I did advocate for it, and the people that were in the audience seemed to be pretty receptive. I left a few flyers, so I got you.
Okay. Thank you. That's it for council reports. So I haven't done closed session before. Do I adjourn into closed session?
Yes.
My motion?
Is it?
We can just do it without objection.
Okay, without objection, we're adjourning into closed session.
I started this morning.
What's that?